In this video, I'm going to teach you how to create a simple 90-degree wedge-shaped surf ramp like this one. This is going to be what the finished product looks like. The good thing about creating a ramp like this is that it will be modular. So what I mean by that is you will be able to create complex ramps out of relatively simple individual models, and you can snap them together and they will be able to be surfed continuously with no ramp bugs, and the textures will tile correctly. So this is what we're going to make. We're going to make this relatively simple wedge shape, but you can make more complex models and ramps later on, and I'll show them off towards the end. But this video is going to assume you know a little bit about Blender, so you know how to navigate quite well. And I'm going to go in depth on each stage of the process from start to finish, so that you should be able to end up creating this ramp quite easily. So let's begin. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is to download the Blender Source Tools, which is an add-on for Blender, which allows us to convert our Blender files or export them into the correct format for source. So download this and then open Blender. Obviously you need to download Blender 2.8 or above. And before we model anything, we're going to want to go to Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons, and then we want to install Blender Source Tools. So I just stuck mine on desktop, and here it is here, and then click on Install Add-on. Now it's important that you don't unzip the download. So just go to where you saved it, install add-on, and that will install Blender Source Tools. So this is the default view you will see in Blender, and these are the default objects that come with a new scene. So just select them all and delete them because we won't be needing them. The first thing we're going to want to do is to create the profile of our ramp. And this is what the ramp shape will be, and it's basically the end, the cap of the ramp. So to do that, first we're going to go Shift A to bring up the Add menu, go to Mesh, and then we're going to add a plane. Now down here you will have parameters that you can change when you create a new object, and we're going to want to make it 512 meters by 512 meters. You will notice that when we zoom out, the camera can't see all of the object. And that's because of Blender's default settings. We're going to need to change those so that we can see the big objects we're making, because they are quite large compared to what Blender is set up for. So to fix that, we're going to want to press N to bring up this properties panel here. I'm going to click on View tab. We're going to want to change this end value here to something high, like 99999. And now as you can see, we can zoom out and see much more of what we're doing. So press N to close that window because we don't need it anymore. And we can start making our profile. Before we do that though, let's just change the units we're using, because we are using meters at the moment, which does correspond to hammer units quite well. But to avoid confusion, let's just click None. So now we are 1-to-1. Blender units and hammer units are the same, which is why we made this 512, because that is going to be the width of our ramp. So now I have this plane. What we're going to want to do is to rotate it. So we press R to get the rotate command. We're going to press Y to rotate it on this Y plane here. We're going to want to rotate it 90 degrees. So we're going to type in 90. And there we have the ramp coming together. Now obviously this is square. So if we were to cut this down here, it would be 45-degree angle and you wouldn't be able to surf on it. So to change that, we're going to want to raise the height of this top edge of our plane. So go into edit mode by pressing tab. Up in the corner you can see this selection. This selects vertices, allows you to click these points here. This one is edges, it allows you to select the edges. And this one is faces, it allows you to select faces. So we're only going to want to select the top edge here. So we click that, and now we have this top edge selected. So we want to move this up, and to do that we're going to press G, which is the move shortcut. And we're going to move it along the Z axis, which is up and down, and we're going to type in 128. So we've moved it 128 units up, Blender units and hammer units. So once we've done this, this is now the width and the height our ramp is going to be. But the profile is not right. It's obviously square. It's not shaped like a ramp is going to be. So to change that, we're going to want to go into vertex select mode. We're going to want to click this left vertex and then shift select this one over here. Now we're going to want to press Alt M, and this is the merge shortcut. So we're merging these two vertices, and we're going to want to merge it at the first one we selected, which was the left one. So Alt M, merge at the first, and then we have the profile of our ramp. So the next step is going to be to use the spin tool on this. So to do that, first we're going to want to go back into edit mode, select the face select button, click our face, and we're going to want to delete that face, but only that face, not anything else. So we press X to go bring up the delete menu, and we're going to want to click on only faces. So now what we have is this profile of a ramp and only the edges, not any faces. So once we have this, we can, still in edit mode, press A to select everything, and then click this spin tool but down here. As you can see, you get this nice blue helper gizmo here. And to start, let's just move that over there. Oh, Steam has finished downloading the Troll. Good news for everyone. Okay, so once we've spun that, it doesn't matter where you spin it, just that will bring up these properties, and now we can change stuff more accurately. So we're going to want to make a 90-degree turn. And here we can change these gizmos, these arrows, change the center of the rotation or the spin. And as you can see, when we do that, we change the shape of our ramp, and it actually becomes a ramp instead of just this profile, as I've been calling it. And you can also make ramps that go this way with no issue. And so I'm going to make a 1024 wide, I guess, ramp, or the size, the footprint of it is going to be 1024 units. Now once you have the shape, you can also increase the steps value here, which makes your ramp more subdivided and increases the smoothness. I'm going to want to keep this low for this kind of ramp, just because it's quite small, and it's quicker for the tutorial if we have less stuff to deal with. So once you're happy with your mesh, you press Tab, go back into object mode, and now that is set up how we want it. There's only a few things left to do before we are done with the mesh. First, we're going to want to get off the spin tool in case we use those gizmos by mistake. We're going to select these edges of this end cap here and press F, and that will fill in the mesh there and create a face. And we're going to want to do that for the other side as well. Press F and we fill it in. So there we have our mesh for our ramp more or less finished. As you can see, the lighting is not quite right yet. It's still flat shaded, and that's a simple fix. So we can go back into edit mode, press A to select all the faces. It helps if you're in face select as well. And then right click anywhere on your mesh and click shade smooth. As you'll notice, this now shades the ramp smoothly. So this basically tells Hammer how to compile the lighting on our map, on our ramp rather. But this obviously looks a bit weird. So to fix that, we can go down to this Object Data Properties tab here, click on Normals and click on Auto Smooth. And this will smooth out the lighting so it looks much better. And then we have it. That is essentially how we create our mesh. The next step is to create the physics mesh out of this mesh, which I will do next. Now that we have our mesh sorted, we're going to want to make the physics mesh, or the physics mesh, as I was calling it. But before we do that, I'm just going to go into this tab here, and this changes the overlays of the viewport. I'm going to turn on edge measurement, and this is going to allow us to see the dimensions of our ramp. This just helps when we're making it. I should have enabled it when we were making the mesh, but it doesn't really matter. Now you can see that the height is 640 and the width is 512. So now that we've done that, we're going to want to make the physics mesh. So first things first, we're going to want to duplicate what we've done already, and then we will make the physics mesh out of that. So to do that, we want to select our mesh in object mode, press Shift D, and now we have two of them. Now we right click to stick it back to where we copied it from. And now in the hierarchy here, you can see we have two. We have our original one and the one we copied. So to work on this new copy, we're going to just want to hide our previous one. So now there is only one in our scene as it currently is. Now there's a very specific way you have to create the physics mesh as opposed to what you do with the visible mesh. And what needs to happen is that these ramps need to have faces in between these. So each segment needs to basically be sealed up, for want of a better word. If you don't do that, what will happen is you'll make your model, and then this is what the physics mesh will actually look like. It will just wrap the entire thing in a physics mesh, and it won't be as detailed, and it won't actually work for surfing. So I'm going to undo this, and there may be a quicker way to do this, but this is the quickest way that I've figured out. So it turns out there was a quicker way. This saves a lot of time, so I spliced it into the video so I can show you. We need to turn on this, which is X-ray mode. Now this allows us, if we go into edit mode and we go into face select, it allows us to select faces through other faces. So these dots, if we select these faces here, we're selecting them on all the sides, and we don't have to spin the camera around or anything. So to do this step a lot quicker, we can use circle select. Now if we press C, that brings up circle select. Now if we left click and drag, we can paint basically our selection, and we can select the faces through it. And also if you to deselect, if you hold middle mouse instead of left mouse, you can then deselect the faces. So once we're in X-ray mode, we want to click this button up here. Now this will put us into a top-down orthographic view. Now this just makes it easier to select our faces. So once we're in this view, we want to press C to go into circle select, and then paint every other section we have so that we're selecting all the faces of that section. And so now, if we turn X-ray mode off, we can see that we have selected all those faces. Now once you've done that, you're going to want to separate this model. So you want to press separate these faces. So you want to press P and then selection, and now you have this object here and this object here. So the final step we want to do is we want to put faces in between these. So to do that, we want to go into edit mode again. We want to select A, I want to press A to select all the faces of our separate model. I'm just going to turn X-ray mode on so you can see what's happening. And then once we have all the faces selected, we press F. And now we've put, if I just turn this off, now we've put faces in between. And now we do this for the other model as well. So select the model, go into edit mode, press A to select all the faces. Let's have a look in X-ray and then press F. And there we go. So now we have this model here and this model here, which have the necessary faces in between them. So the last step is we want to select both of these and then hold Control and press J, and that will join the two separate objects together. So finally, we want to go back into edit mode, and this step's important. We need to shade smooth this object if it's not already. And now here we have it. You might notice that you have auto smooth already on and it won't look right. So if you check here in the object data properties and auto smooth is on, you need to click that off so that your ramp looks like this when we smooth all of the faces. And so that is how you create the physics mesh. And next we're going to go into UV unwrapping. So before we get started with the UV map, I should just say that this is a rather simple method of making UV maps. and this is probably for beginners. Because our ramp is quite small, we can use this way and not have any problems, but if our ramp is larger and has more sections in it, then this method will get a bit clumsier and take a bit longer. So at the end of the video, I'm going to add a little segment which is for people who are more familiar with Blender, and it's a little bit more complicated than the UVs we're going to make, but in the long run it will actually save time, especially if you're having to UV unwrap really large ramps with loads and loads of sections. So UV unwrapping is probably the most, I would say, daunting task. Oh, hello tubes. Probably the most daunting task for someone just starting, but there are ways to make it much more easy. So to start, we're going to want to texture our mesh, not the physics mesh. So we're going to go back to our plane, make that visible, and make our physics object invisible. So here we have our mesh. So first things first, we're going to go over to our UV editing tab, and now this will allow us to edit UVs on this left side and select faces on this right side. But as you can see, we run into the same problem we had in the viewport earlier. So to fix that, press N again, go to view, and change this end cap. Now we can see all of our ramp rather. Okay. To start, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put a texture here so that we can see what we're doing. Now, I have test textures which I like to use. This way is up. The function of this texture should be pretty obvious. It tells me which way up things are. So I find this handy because you can't always tell which way the textures are sitting on your model. So now we want to select everything and go to UV and then click reset. Now what this does is it turns each of these into a square, which takes up the entire UV space basically. Now to see what we're doing on this viewport, we're going to need to add a material. To do that, we click this material properties, and we're going to want to create a new material for this ramp, and we shall call it ramp. Now the name of this is important for later on when we export our model, but for now, just call it ramp, and we can talk about that later. Now in this base color option here, we have this little toggle. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to change this to an image texture and then open the same image we just selected for our UV view, which is test. Now we can't see that at the moment here because what we have to do is we have to change our viewport, which I can't quite see. There we go. Let's change this to this, which is our material preview. As you can see, our material now shows up on our mesh, but it's obviously a bit wonky. This is why I like to use the this way up helper texture. It just helps me to see where these need to be aligned. So I'm going to want to adjust these so that they align perfectly. And we do this so that when we're snapping these models together, if that's what you want to do, then the texture will tile perfectly with the next segment we're going to use. So this is good for modular ramps if you want the textures to always be consistent. But you can learn about UV unwrapping in Blender and make any kind of material you want for this. But this is what I like to do, just so that everything tiles correctly. So once you have all these faces, you'll notice that when you select any face, it will also bring up the corresponding UV. And if I move this in the UV view, you can see it moves also on the ramp. So now I'm going to want to select all of these, and now I am going into my UV view here. I'm going to press A to select all of them, and now I'm going to want to rotate them. So I'm going to press R, and now I am rotating. If I hold Control, I am doing it by sections. Now we're going to want to do this so that this way up is the right way up. But as you can see, these faces are actually mirrored the wrong way. So we're going to rotate them so that this text is the right way up. And next we're going to want to scale them in our x-axis so that they are round the right way. So basically what we've done is we've rotated them and we've flipped them so that it displays the texture the right way up. And we can do this for the backside as well. So this is why I like to use this texture, just because it's easier to see what's going on. Now, depending on how you make your ramp, this scaling and flipping, you might not have to actually do that. Oh, I've gone all weird. There we go. Yeah, you might not have to do this scaling flipping thing. It depends how you make your thingy, your ramps in the first place. I think there's also a way that you can change the normals of the mesh you've made so that this step is quite quicker. So we're going to rotate again, press S to scale, X along the X-axis, and then we scale. And now all this text is the right way up and the right way around. Now when you're scaling and when you're rotating, if you hold Control, it will snap to certain angles. I don't know what it is. It looks like it's, 5 degrees. So you're going to want to do that just so that you're not making them all skew-if. Now for these ends, you'll see that this face is obviously not a square, it's a triangle. But to make this the right way around, all we have to do is select this vertex here. This is the same as it is over in the model. You can select vertex, edges and faces. I'm not sure what this is actually. Islands. Cool. Okay, so we want to select this one, press G, and we're going to want to move it over to this side. And then we're going to want to select this one, press G, Control, drag up this way. As you can see, this is the wrong way around. But if you keep doing this, then you will flip this around the right way. You can also probably rotate this, come to think of it. But yeah, I'm just doing it this way because why not? Why do things right when you can do things slower and wrong? That's what I always say. So here we go. Now, there we are. It's the right way up, but yet again, it is the wrong way around. So S, X, and then we'll flip it. And that's the right way up and the right way around. Now we're going to do the same for this side. Now I'm sure, I'm absolutely positive there are better ways to do this. There we go. We can just rotate the whole thing. So perhaps you should just ignore everything I say because I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. And now that is our ramp textures. There is obviously one thing to do left. One thing left to do rather. I start talking like Yoda. It's very late. We're going to want to help these faces to repeat correctly because at the moment they're obviously repeating far too frequently. These M1s are about what we want the faces inside to be as well. So to do this, we're going to change our test texture. And we're going to change it into what our eventual that's the same one. What our eventual material will be, which is this ramp.jpg. Now this is a TF2 texture. This is the texture I made for Telstar. It's basically an amalgamation of a couple of TF2 textures. So we're going to want to change that in the UV view, and we're going to want to change that in our base color here as well. So now we have those. As you can see, it tiles. It looks okay, but it tiles too frequently. It's too squished, basically. So to change that, we want to select all these faces, and we're going to want to resize them. So go into vertex mode if you're not already in it. Press B. This is box select. This allows you to drag a selection and then select all the vertices there. Now once we have these selected, press G, and then we want to hold Control and drag them over here. As you can see, this changes the size of our UV, and it also changes the position. We're going to want to stick it over this side so that we can select this next one, go into face select and shift it over, and then select this one and move it over here, and then select this one and move it over here. So what this is doing Now these ramps, these 4 sections, take up the entire texture, so that when you get to this one, it will then repeat correctly. So this is the repeating line, and we're going to want to do the same for these. So we select this one, move it in here, select this one, move it over here, and this one over here. Now we have the the texture tiling perfectly, and we can also do that for the back and the bottom as well, which I will do without you. The next step we're going to want to do is we're going to go on to exporting our model and getting it into Hammer. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to export these. But first things first, we're going to want to rename these meshes we've created. So first we're going to want to rename our visible mesh to ramp, and our physics mesh we're going to want to rename to ramp _ PHYS for physics. And we're going to set that visible. Now if you've installed Blender source tools correctly, if you click this button here, which is the scene properties button, you should have the source engine export little drop down menu here, and there's a bunch of other ones, but we're going to just use this one for now. So first things first, we're going to want to set up the export path. Now this is where our models will export to. I have an export folder in my on my desktop, and I'm going to click that, and this is the format it will export to, and we want studio model data SMD. Now we want to set up our engine path. Now this is where our bin folder is for our install for whatever game we're making these models for. I'm going to do it for Counter-Strike. So navigate to that bin folder, press accept, and there we go. So now these are ready to export. So all we do is we click on the export button, and we click on scene export to files. Now we'll export both of the files in the scene and call them what we have labeled them here. So export, scene export. Now you will get a warning. You can ignore this. This is just warning you that our physics mesh doesn't have a material assigned to it, and it doesn't need one, so that's fine. So if you close Blender and go to the export folder, you will see you now have a ramp.smd and rampPhysics.smd. So now that we have our 2 meshes, the next step is we're going to want to create the textures for our model. And to do that, we're going to need a tool called VTF Edit. Here is the link on Game Banana. I'll put this in the description like I did with Blender source tools. So once you downloaded that, double click on it, open it up, and now this is VTF Edit. So before we get going with anything here, you're going to want to create our material. I have one I created earlier. And here it is. This is just a TF2 texture. There's 2 textures, and I put one as a border, and then the other one is the main one. I'll show you how to create textures like this later on in the video. But once you have your textures sorted, you're going to want to go to File, Import, and then find your texture. Here we go. Now these are the import options. For the VTF, you can generally leave these as they are. You don't really need to worry. If you need higher detail, you can change DXT1 to DXT5 or DXT3, or even one of these uncompressed formats or lower compression, and it would be it will increase the file size quite dramatically, but you will get a lot more quality. Go over to the Advanced tab. Again, you don't need to worry about these, but if you are running on an older game and this isn't working for whatever reason, you can lower the version. Stick this on the default for now, but if you need other options, you can probably increase the version, but the default is fine, so you don't have to worry about any of these. So now press OK, and that will import our texture into VTF Edit. Now there's a bunch of flags down here. I'm not going to go into what all of these do. There's a resource that you can find which will tell you all about these and what they do. One thing I will say is if you're importing pixel art, you're going to want to click on Point Sample, and that will prevent any filtering, so it'll be nice and crisp for you. Okay, I'm going to click on anisotropic filtering. I can never say that right. And sRGB. Don't worry why for now, but we're going to do that. So once you have this set up, you're going to want to go to File, Save As, and now you're going to want to navigate to your game directory. So Steam Apps, Common, Counter-Strike Source, C-Strike. Now this is the folder where your models and your materials folders are. So click on Materials. I'm going to put mine in Models, Tutorial, and Ramp. As you can see, I already have a ramp texture, so I'm going to call this Cramp. I'm going to save it, and now I'm going to navigate to that folder, and you're going to see that I have my new texture. A really important thing for our model is we're going to want to go to the VMT file. It generates a VMT file, and this basically tells the game how to render our texture. But we have created a light map generic shader here, or material. We're going to want to change this to vertex lit generic. Now what that does is that tells the engine how to light this and light it per vertex, which is important for models. So once you've edited that, go File, Save, and then we have our VTF file and our VMT file. You can also create the VMT file manually in here. If you go to Tools, Create VMT file, click the base texture. That can be empty actually, but it does it automatically once you've saved it. Go to Options, Shader, change this to Vertex Lit Generic. Oh, actually I spelled it wrong in ours, so this is probably good. And then go to Create. And then we can go to Create, let's go Manual, save that. We can open that. We can see it's Vertex Lit Generic, which is what it should be. And we have our base texture, which is here. Okay, so now that we have our textures created, we're going to want to move on now to compiling it. We have our meshes, we have our visible mesh, our physics mesh, and we also have our textures now, our VTF file and our VMT file in their correct directory. So now we're going to move on to how to export this, how to compile it rather, using a QC file. And I'll explain all about those in the next bit. So you don't need to be intimidated by this wall of text. I'm going to go through it line by line and explain what this code does. It's quite simple once it's explained to you, so don't worry about it. But first things first, we're going to want to. I'm going to want to teach you how to create one from scratch. Just so you know, we're going to use this one, and I'm going to explain everything about it. But just so you know, you want to open up Notepad. Save as type, click all files and put .qc as the file type. And I'm going to call this example.qc. I'm going to save it to desktop. I'm going to click save. And then when we have that on our desktop, I'm going to drag that into our folder. And we can see that we now created a QC file. So that's how you create them from scratch. But as I said, let's go through this ramp one I made, and I'll just explain everything. So the model name is going to be the name of our model. It's going to be at tutorial/ramp.mdl. And that's where we're going to view it in Hammer. That's the path we're going to find it. So navigate to your Counter-Strike folder and your C-Strike folder, and you'll have a models section. And tutorial is where this is going to be. And it's going to be called ramp.mdl. So the next field is body mesh. Now this is the mesh we created earlier, and we named it ramp.smd when we exported it, which is important. So here we have it in our export folder. We have ramp.smd. I'm not sure if you need to put the QC file in the same folder as you have your SMD files, but I do that anyway, and it works. So I've never tested if you need to, but you probably do, so let's just do that for now. So this next line tells the engine that this is a static prop. It's not dynamic, it's not going to move, and so static prop is fine. This next line is surface property, or surface prop, and this is the property of the surface, which is concrete. Now you can change this to metal if you're making a metal ramp, or brick, or wood, or whatever. CD materials, this is where we saved our materials to with VTF edit. And we saved it to models, tutorial. So if we go to our C-Strike folder, go to Materials, Models, Tutorial, this is where we need our textures. So make sure you have those in there. The next is Sequence Idle. Now this is for animation. We don't have an animation, so if we put this, it basically says that there's no animation. But if you don't have this, if you just delete that, it won't compile correctly, so it needs an animation even if there isn't one. And the next line is collision model. And this is where we have our ramp underscore fizz, which we have here. This next stuff basically allows the compiler to have more convex pieces than it usually would. So if you make a really elaborate ramp, this number needs to be quite high. I've put it to 2048, which is really high, just so that you can use this over and over again and you don't have to worry about ever changing this. So that is all about QC files. Now we're going to use this QC file to compile our model. So there's a bunch of ways we can compile our model. I'm going to teach you 3 ways. I'm going to do it manually first, and then I'm going to use a program called Crowbar, which we'll download shortly. But it's always good to know multiple ways to do it so that you can troubleshoot and know what's going wrong. So to do this manually, essentially what this QC file does is it tells the compiler how to compile the model and where to reference the materials and where to reference the model itself. So to do it manually, we're going to want to navigate to our C-Strike folder, Counter-Strike source, go to the bin folder. Now you need to, the bin folder is the place that contains Hammer and Half-Life Model Viewer and all that. And we're going to want to scroll down until we find Studio Model. Now this is the compiler, which uses QC files to compile our models. So open the folder which has Studio Model in it. Open your folder which has your QC file and your ramps in it. And now all you have to do is click and drag your ramp QC file over onto Studio Model. And this will happen really quickly, but you'll see a window and it will basically compile our model into the directories which are in our QC file. So click and drag it over, let go, and then there we go. So that happened very quickly. But if we go to our C-Strike folder, our models folder, our tutorial, we now have our compiled ramp. So that's one way to do it. That's the manual way to do it. The next way I'm going to show you is with Crowbar. Here's the link. This is a Steam community group for the tool, but here is the download link here, and this will tell you how to install it and whatnot. So once you've done that, let's open it up. Let's first delete the compiled model so that we can see that we're actually compiling it each time. Let's keep that folder open so we can tell, then open Crowbar. Now to set this program up, it's quite easy. There's tutorials on the website which will tell you everything you need to know about how to do this, but it's quite simple. You can set up games and you can add Counter-Strike here. There's a bunch of different source engine games you can use, but we're using Counter-Strike. And what that will do is that will fill in all of these paths to the various studiomodel.exe, which we use to compile gameinfo.txt and whatnot. So mine is in a separate hard drive. It's not my C drive, so it might not be able to find it automatically. So if that's the case for you, you just have to replace the C directory with wherever your Steam apps folder is. And once you've done that, you want to go over to the compile tab here, and the QC input, that's obviously where our QC file is, and I already have it loaded in, but this is where our QC file is. You're going to want to open that, put that in there, and now this is the output folder. Now as you can see here, it tells you the games models folder, and you can either browse to this folder or put it in manually. I can't remember whether this automatically pulled it or whether I had to do it, but either way, put in the correct directory there. Game that has the model compiler Counter-Strike source. And so we are ready to go. So just click compile, and that will do. And the good thing about doing it this way is you can actually see if anything went wrong. You can go back and read it. There might be a way to do that with Studio Model, but it goes by so quick, and I don't know how to keep it there. But you can see if there's anything going wrong, you can check it here. And now to view your model, you can go to Use in View, Open Viewer, then go to File, Load Model, and then select our ramp. And here we have it. It's obviously weird looking at the moment, and I'll explain why just shortly. Just in case you make your model like this, I'm going to tell you how to fix it. Obviously, it's inside out, essentially, but we can fix that very easily. If we click over to Models, we can see that the VMT is loaded, and this is Models Tutorial Ramp. And so that is how you compile it with Crowbar. So to fix this issue we had when we compiled our model, as you can see, what's happened is that the normal maps of the ramp are facing the wrong way. And so we can see through it, and it looks a bit weird. Unless you want your ramps to look like this, I'm going to show you how to fix it. So open back Blender, and we're going to need to re-export our meshes. But first, we're going to want to recalculate the normal maps so that they face the right way. So click on your mesh, go to Tab, select all the faces, right-click, and go to, where is it? No, it's Mesh, Normals, and Recalculate Outside. Now that's all we have to do. And once we've done that, we can re-export both of our models. We probably don't need to do both, but let's just do both anyway. And now we will recompile it with our new fixed model. So sometimes you will make your ramps and the normals will be facing the wrong way, depending on how you use the spin tool. So it's always good to know how to fix this issue if you have it. And there we go. Now that the normals are facing the right way, our ramp looks normal. So now I'm going to teach you how to compile your model within Blender itself. I prefer using Crowbar just because, as I said, you can see everything that's going on. But now I'm going to teach you how to compile it in Blender itself. So bring Blender back up again. Now in your source engine export, we've already set up this, so we don't need to worry about this. But this section, Source Engine QC Compiles, now this is important. So we're going to want to open up our game path. Now this is the folder where Studio model.exe is created. So we're going to navigate to that folder now. Let me just get there quickly. Here we go. So that will be in the bin folder. And you can see here, if we scroll down, this has our, where are you? Studio model.exe. And that's the folder that you need to reference here. Oh, apparently it's not. What does it need? Is it this one? No. Is it C-Strike? Ah, so it's not where the studio model is. It's where your models and materials folder is. So you will usually you run into a bunch of problems with your model, and that's usually the cause. You're referencing the wrong place. There's a bunch of directories you need to remember, but towards the end I'll go through troubleshooting, and so you don't run into these problems. Now the QC path, this is where our QC file is, and we already know where that is. Okay, so we can do this little checkbox here, which is compile all on export. So then if we export it, it compiles it as well. I'm not going to do that for now. I'm just going to compile all now. It failed. Why did that fail? Let's just export. 2 files exported and 1 QC compiled. Whatever then. It didn't work if we did it compile all now. Not sure why. But if we click this compile all on export and then click on export, it will work. And then we can launch Half-Life Model Viewer from here, load model, and then there we go. That's our model. So that's 3 ways to compile it. This is probably the most streamlined way, but it's just your preference for what your workflow is for your models. Okay, so now that we have our model compiled, I'm going to go through using these models in Hammer and how to correctly light them and the best way to use them. Okay, so now we have Hammer open. I've just created a simple box map with a skybox on the top. So let's add our model. So click on the entity, double click on it, change it into a prop static, and then click apply, go to world model, and then go to the folder where we compiled our model to, which is tutorial/ramp then click apply, and then here we have our model. Now I'm just going to create a simple surf section using these using this ramp, sorry. And the good thing about it is that they're completely modular, so you can shift drag to duplicate it, rotate it, and then align it with the previous one. And you'll notice that the texture we created is actually seamless between the two models. We can then select these two, drag, rotate, and now we've created a bowl. And the good thing is, at the parts where these models join, you won't actually get any ramp bugs because they are completely welded together. So even at the seams where they meet, you won't get any ramp bugs, which is really good. And now I'm going to just move this over so I can make sure that we actually land on it. There we go. Yeah, that should be fine. So now I'm going to run this and I'm going to show you what it looks like in game. So let's just run this very cool surf map. I might release it as something, it'll be very popular, I think. Okay, I don't think I have surf settings, so let's just, SV, air accelerate, let's do 100. Okay, so now we're ready to surf. And so here we go, let's test our models. And cool, seems to be working well. And so yeah, as you notice, as you can see, when you cross the part where the models join, you don't actually get any ramp bugs, and you can surf this as well as you can with brushes. But the upside is obviously you can move them around and you don't have to worry about floating point imprecision where your ramps will load differently and the vertices will shift about. So if you worry about that, you don't have to worry about it with these mods, with these ramps rather. Now, as you can see, the lighting is not great. It's not as smooth as it should be, and that is the downside to using modeled ramps. But there are ways to improve it, and I'll just show you that now. So let's just exit out of here for now. So what you're going to want to do to fix the lighting or to improve it, in your run map, you usually see this view. If you go to expert and click down in light _exe, now this is the executable that generates the light, and we're going to need to add a parameter in here, and the parameter we're going to add is static prop lighting. What this does is it improves how the lighting is generated on props. So we just add that to the start here, and then we click go, and we compile the map again. And as you'll be able to see now, the lighting on our ramps is much better than it was. Oh, the CT team is full. Who's there? And there we go. Now we have these shadows, and the join between the ramps is much better. While I was recording this section, I forgot to mention that there's another way that you can improve the lighting on your models, and that is with an info lighting entity. So by default, Hammer generates the lighting for the prop from the origin of the model, and that is where you rotate and where you snap. You can change that in Blender, and I'll show you how to do that later in the video, but you can also use what is called an info lighting entity to change that. So I'm just going to create one here, info lighting, and you click apply, and you're going to want to give it a name. Let's call ours Derek. Okay, so now instead of using the origin of the model, we can double click to go into our model properties, click on lighting origin, and then select the info lighting we made earlier. So now your model will sample its lighting from here or wherever you put it, and not the origin. Now I'm just going to show you what you can do with more complex ramps. I'm going to show you ones I made for TF2. Now these are the ramps I made for Telstar, and as you can see, they're made in a similar way. So they are a bunch of modular ramps, which when you fit them together, you can create more complex shapes. Same with this ramp over here. This is made from a kicker style ramp, a 90-degree wedge, and then this droopy arch kind of ramp here. So yeah, the good thing about this is it's really easy to make modular ramps and create really complex ramps out of relatively few models. So this, I think this entire little surf map here is made from about 10 individual models, maybe even less. So yeah, it's super simple to use. And another good thing is you can create different skins for the meshes as well. So I can go in here, change my skin, and then I'll make this ramp. This ramp's now red, or I can change it so it's blue. This is obviously good for TF2 where you have two teams, red versus blue, and you can change the ramp depending on the team's color. So I'm just going to show you this in game, and so you can see the kind of things you can make with these modular ramps. So here we are in TF2, and as you can see, these ramps I made a while ago have a self-illumination mask on them. So you get this light up trim, so it lights up in dark areas. So yeah, we're just going to surf these now so you can see the kind of ramps you can create using this method. As you can see, there's no problem surfing them. The textures all line up perfectly, and they surf really well. These were made quite a while ago now, and they're quite simple. They're not very... I wanted to keep the poly count low because I didn't really have a good PC then, and I wanted to be as optimized as possible. But you can really add much more steps when you use the spin tool, and you can increase the complexity of this. It might also improve the lighting somewhat, but probably not drastically. So yeah, I want to thank you for watching. Hopefully you've learned something. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll try to answer as best I can. But at the end of this video, I'm going to leave I'm going to have a section for troubleshooting. So these are the issues I've run into when I'm making these, and I'll just explain how to fix them, show you what they are, and hopefully you won't run into them yourself. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. So this is probably the most common issue you'll have, and this is where the material doesn't load correctly, so you get this default missing texture, which is these pink and black cubes. So if you go into the model tab here, it will tell you why this is happening. The model attempted to load one or more VMTs it can't find. Now there are a number of ways this can go wrong. So I'm just going to go through a few of them. If we look down here, materials used, it says lamp. Now that should be ramp. Now I've changed this here, and if you accidentally add a material on and it's not the same name as the texture we're going to use, you will have these issues. So make sure that your material you apply is called ramp. So now we'll export this again. I'll compile this again, and we can see that that would fix the problem. Here we go, we're going to load the model, ramp, and now we have our material. You'll be pleased to know there are numerous ways that this can go wrong. Let's say in our QC file, we misspell where our materials are. So we miss let's say we miss the L on the end. We'll save this, and now we'll compile this model again, and you can see we'll have the same issue because it's no longer able to find where the materials are, because we've misspelled where our materials are located. And you'll get the same issue here. Model attempted to load one or more VMTs it can't find, although the materials used now says ramp because we are using the correct material in Blender. So that's a good way to test where this might go wrong. So if you see down here this is correct, then you know it's an issue either with your QC file directory here not loading the material correctly. Now there's even another way that this could go wrong, I believe. If we go to our C-Strike folder and we go to our materials folder, if our VMT doesn't contain the correct material, so if we put, we misspell ramp and put ram, and we save this, we'll get this same error as well. So now I'll compile it again, and you'll see that we are still pink and black. But it is now loading the correct VMT because our QC file is actually correct. So now we know that if this is ramp, we know that we've added the material in Blender. If the VMT is loaded, we know that our QC file is fine. And so if those are true and we still have these bloody pink and black textures, we know that the VMT file is spelled incorrectly. So we can edit that, save it, and then recompile our model. Oh, recompile our model, view it, and it should now be fixed. There we go. So that's how to fix pink and black missing textures. That's usually the biggest issue I see people having when they're making these maps, models. And so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the physics issue. So if you load up your model and you click this physics models toggle, so you can see the physics shape, and it's looks like this. It's obviously gone wrong somehow. What this has done is it's basically created a convex shape around the entire mesh. So you'd surf along this edge and you'd walk along the top of it. So obviously this is not what we want for surf ramps. So to fix this, you've just got to make sure you follow the steps correctly for creating your physics mesh. You've got to make sure that each of these segments is its own thing. So you copy your mesh to use as a basis to create the physics mesh, but you shouldn't use your mesh as the physics mesh. You should make sure you follow the steps right. So if I was to select this face, for example, and press G, I have both. I don't want both enabled. So if I was to select this face and press G, I can move this, I can move this, I can move this, and you can see that they're separate objects in and of themselves. And if I was to try and do this with the ramp, you can see that I'll move this and they are joined together. So you've got to make sure that when you create your physics ramps that they are separate little objects. So I'm going to now export these again, now that we know we've made them correctly, and we're going to compile them again, just so you can know what your physics mesh should look like. And now it's correct. So those are the two main issues I've had creating these. Obviously, if you have other issues you want to ask me about, feel free to comment. I should mention, actually, as a last little thing, the origin of our ramp is currently this spot here. As we were making it, this is just where it ended up, but you can actually move this origin, and what this is this will be the center of the rotation. So it's actually not in a bad position at the moment, but if you wanted to move that, it's very simple. So let's just say we wanted to move that up. We select both G, Z, and move the whole ramp up 256 units. So now it sits on the bottom. And to move this origin point down here so that this becomes the point at which it snaps on a grid in Hammer. So you could put that here, for instance, and then you can rotate it around this pivot point in the center, or however you want to make them. But to just change this origin, you go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. And now, as you can see, we move the dot to the bottom of the ramp. So when we rotate, it rotates it around this point. This is good just to set it where you prefer your models to be. Okay, so that's everything. Good luck, guys. So I'm going to show you a better approach to creating UVs if your ramp is quite a lot larger and there's loads of segments. The simpler way will take a lot longer. It would still work, but here's just a more streamlined approach for those who have a familiarity with Blender and a slightly more advanced. What we're going to want to do first is we're going to want to create seams on our mesh. I'm not going to explain what those are. I'm going to assume that you know what they are. And we're going to create one there, and there, there, and one along the back. So now we have our edges selected. We want to go to Mark Seam, and now they have our seams set up. So once we've done that, select all the faces and go to UV and then select Unwrap. So now we have our islands for our specific faces. So we have all the islands for the front, the back, the bottom, and the two triangular edges. First things first, let's select all these. Now what we're going to want to do is create one of these so that it is a perfect rectangle. And I'll show you why in a sec, but let's just do that now. So select these, press scale along the X and press 0. And now they are perfectly in line with each other. And then do the same for these two, S, X, 0. Now they are straight in a line. And for this one as well, S, X, oh no, we need Y for that one, S, Y, 0. And now this UV face here is perfectly rectangular with the right angles. So once we've done that, we want to select this UV and click on Follow Active Quads. Now that will change our island and make sure everything is straight. If I undo that and redo it, you'll see that's the effect we want. Now we'll select all these, we'll move it to the middle, and then we're going to want to eyeball it, and we're just going to want to make sure it's the right way up and scale it up so that it's more or less in line with the texture. Now once we're happy more or less with where it is, we can do this more accurately. So click over to vertex mode, box select all of the top ones, press N to open the menu here, and then press 1 here. And now we're moving all of those up here, and we're snapping it to this position here. Now we do the same for this bottom row, but obviously we do it for the bottom. So select them all, and in the Y axis here, the Y value, smash that to 0. So now they are aligned perfectly in the top and the bottom, and you'll see that has happened now. So next thing is we'll center this. That didn't work. We will 0.5. Okay, so that's now in the middle. So now all we need to do is we need to go to UV, snap to pixels, and make sure it's on in the corner. Without that, you won't be able to snap it correctly. Now all we need to do is make sure that these two sides here, the edges of these two UV faces align with the edge of the texture. So we press X to scale it on the X, and then scale it until they snap to these coordinates here. So now we have our faces set up, and you could leave it like this, or you can move it over here and then drag it, and then we know that this number of UV faces takes up the entire texture. And if you're happy with that, that's fine. You can also obviously scale this to be bigger or smaller. So if you want more repetition in your texture, you can just do this, scale it along the X and make it bigger. So you could do it like this, if I've done that right. Not quite. There we go. So now it repeats much more frequently than it would otherwise. And so there you have it. You do the rest for the back and the bottom. The only thing different is we do the same method for the edges as we did in our simpler version. So we just select the triangular faces here, push UV and then reset. And then we just rotate these in the direction we need them to be. For these faces, you might notice if you do rotate, you can have it the right way up, but this vertex in the corner here needs to be moved over to this corner. And there we go. So that's how you create more advanced UV shapes.